Welcome, friends, to our Monday morning New Path book study and meditation. My name's Sanjan, and let's begin with a prayer, and then we'll follow it with a whisper that I'm going to read, a whisper from eternity, taken from this great book that is written by Paramahansa Yogananda, edited by Swami Kriyananda. So let's close the eyes. Feel the tangible blessings of the great gurus with us, of God and the divine. And let's pray. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and beloved Guru Deva Paramahansa Yogananda, and our dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, all saints, all masters, we lovingly bow at thy feet. Beloved Yogananda, beloved Swami Kriyananda, guide this satsang. Make these teachings living and real within our consciousness, within our bodies, within our minds, within our souls. May our thoughts, words, and deeds be infused with your vibration. Help us to be ever more perfect channels of this divine ray. We are yours. Be thou forever ours. Om peace. Amen. And I just thought to share this particular whisper. It's a wonderful whisper. So many whispers from eternity that are about meditation. This certainly is one of the deeper ones. And today we start chapter 19. We start to talk about the first days of a neophyte. Yeah, the first days of a neophyte. And so we begin to hear about Swami's meditation practice. And so I thought this one would be great. It's Whisper 159, page 112 from Whispers from Eternity. So closing the eyes, taking the power of these words into your consciousness, feeling Master's blessings. I entered my temple of silence. Seated with a straight spine, I switched off the dazzling, diverting light of energy, animating my sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. I commanded my breath to cease its cleansing work in the body and make no noise. I ordered my heart to suspend its dictatorship over my myriad body cells, forcing them to eat the blood it sends them. I sat still and listened. Then, Mother, I heard the soft approach of thy footsteps. Thou didst come, bearing an overflowing chalice of life-sustaining spiritual rays. Sustain me evermore, O Divine Mother, with the rays of life-giving light. The heart, cells, brains, and thoughts of this body, thy body, not mine, will waste no longer with decay. Lo, they are now immortal with thy everlasting life. Let's just meditate, bringing the attention as we began to do last week up to the spiritual eye. Feel Divine Mother bringing us this chalice with the rays of life-giving light as we offer our devotion, our entire life into this point. Let us fill ourselves with the overflowing cup of enthusiasm and dedication that J. Donald Walters, our beloved Swami Kriyananda, brought to Mount Washington in those very first days of being a neophyte. Absorb that enthusiasm, that dedication, that wisdom and openness and magnetic, vibrant energy. And just keeping this state of awareness as we begin to listen to chapter 19.
Chapter 19, The First Days of a Neophyte. The daily routine at Mount Washington was fairly individual. Freedom was given us, as it is in most Indian ashrams, for private spiritual practice. We met regularly for work and for meals, and held occasional evening classes in the SRF printed lessons, following the classes with group meditation. Paramahansaji had expressed the wish that we meditate together more often. We lacked a leader, however, and group initiative that has no one to stimulate it seldom travels in a straight line. Reverend Bernard, whom Master had placed in charge of our daily activities, wouldn't assume responsibility for our spiritual life, which he viewed as Master's exclusive domain. Indeed, I suspect Master himself didn't greatly mind our lack of organization, for while daily group meditations might have kept a few of the less dedicated monks more firmly on the path, it would also have interfered with the free time the rest of us could devote to longer private meditations. Master wanted our spiritual endeavors to spring from the depths of a sincere yearning for God, and not merely to follow mechanically the well-worn paths of established habit. To be sure, he stressed the importance of regular practice, but I think the clockwork regularity of Western monastic discipline must have struck him as rather too mechanical and too much a part of that most far-reaching of Western delusions, the belief that perfection can be achieved through outward, not inward reforms. At any rate, Master himself often lifted us out of any groove of routine into which we'd become too firmly settled. In his company, there was little danger that our mental grooves would become ruts. I myself was glad for the opportunity to develop a meditative routine of my own. Soon I was rising at 4 o'clock every morning, staggering out of bed admittedly with the indispensable aid of an alarm clock. After practicing Master's exercises for recharging the body with energy, I would meditate 2 or 3 hours. At 7 o'clock, I would enter the main building where I showered and breakfast before going out into the garden for work. At noon, I would put food aside for myself in the men's dining room, then meditate half an hour in the main chapel upstairs. Evenings, I would eat lightly. A heavy meal in the stomach, I discovered, makes it difficult to meditate deeply. Study a little, then go down to my cave and meditate 2 or 3 more hours before bed. Soon I was looking forward to my meditation times as eagerly as the worldly man looks forward to an evening's partying. Indeed, much more eagerly. Never had I dreamed there could be such a wealth of enjoyment within my own self. In addition to techniques of meditation, Paramhansa Yogananda taught, as I've indicated, a series of energization exercises. He based these exercises on a little-known truth, which Reverend Bernard explained to me on my first evening at Mount Washington. Cosmic energy is drawn into the body by the agency of the will through the medulla oblongata. The greater the will, Master said, the greater the flow of energy. Practicing these exercises gratefully every morning and evening, I found them marvelously effective for banishing fatigue and developing a radiant, lasting sense of well-being. Saturdays, no work was scheduled. This gave us time for personal chores and for longer private meditations. Usually I meditated late into the morning, then kept silence the rest of the day. Sometimes I fasted. In the evening I meditated again for several hours. Sundays we attended morning and evening services at our church in Hollywood. There being only a pickup truck to get us there, we younger monks piled happily into the back of it for the trip, which took 15 or 20 minutes. In winter, to harden ourselves against the cold and to develop titiksha, endurance, we sometimes bared our bodies from the waist up, joyously welcoming the invigorating air and laughing with youthful good spirits as we bounced along. "You should learn tumo," Boone shouted to me one day as the wind whistled around us. "What's that?" "It's a Tibetan technique for overcoming cold." From then on, if ever Boone looked a little chilly, I would shout to him to "Do mo, tumo." The Hollywood church was charming in its simplicity. Its color scheme, both inside and out, was blue, white, and gold. Master's colors, Boone informed me. Little niches on either side of the sanctuary contained figurines depicting various leaders in the great world religions. Paramhansa Yogananda had named this a church of all religions. His teachings stressed the underlying oneness of all faiths. Seats for about 115 people faced the small stage from which services were conducted. Before and after services, curtains were usually drawn shut across this stage. When they were parted, there stood revealed along the back wall an altar containing 5 niches, each with a picture of one of our line of gurus, Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswar, Paramhansa Yogananda, and Jesus Christ. Bernard, who was to conduct the service in the church the first Sunday after my arrival, showed me around beforehand. "Why," I asked him, "is the picture of Jesus Christ on our altar too? Surely he isn't in our line of gurus. Do we include him just to avoid criticism from the Christian denominations?" Bernard smiled. "Master has told us it was Jesus Christ himself who appeared to Babaji and asked him to send this teaching of self-realization to the West. My followers," Jesus asserted at that meeting, "have forgotten the art of divine inner communion. Outwardly they do good works, but they have lost sight of the most important of my teachings, to seek the kingdom of God first." The work he sent to the West through Master is helping people to commune inwardly with God, continued Bernard. Jesus, too, through people's practice of meditation, is becoming a living reality for them, a being with whom they can commune rather than merely read about in the Bible. This was what Jesus meant when he said that he would come again. Master often speaks of this work as the second coming of Christ, where it teaches people how to fulfill the true promise of Jesus, not to return again outwardly, but in the souls of those who loved him and communed with him. That isn't what most Christians believe, I smiled dryly. True, but you may recall several biblical accounts in which Jesus rebuked the apostles themselves for taking words literally that he had meant metaphorically. I have meat to eat that ye know not of, he said, and they thought he must have food hidden about his person. Jesus himself, moreover, placed his second coming within the present lifetimes of his listeners. Verily I say unto you, he told them, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. In those days, and many times since then, he has fulfilled his promise to appear, not to fanatical Adventists, some of whom have waited for him on hilltops and flowing white gowns, but to true devotees who sought him humbly and ardently in their own souls. Tell me, I said.
Okay. I was just deciding whether to finish then or just to carry on a little bit, but I think we'll finish there. So here we are, we have another wonderful chapter to begin. The first days of the neophyte, and just drawing from some of the things that Swamiji has said in this particular chapter. And what comes to mind for me is a little bit about meditation. I've mentioned it a couple times already in these talks, but the points that really kind of rise to the surface for me that are kind of highlighted are just this really interesting thought that how Master, wasn't necessarily so enamored by this kind of strict, rigid routine that we have in the West of having, meditations at set times and everything ordered and in perfect kind of outward uniformity and reliability in these things. And if we remember from hearing about his time with Swami Sri Yukteswar with Autobiography of a Yogi, you just remember them going for walks on, the beaches and out by, not by the beaches, by the Ganges. And, in the early hours after being up all evening meditating, there was no real set routine with a master. It was just in the divine flow. And Swami Kriyananda himself later, certainly at Ananda, did things as and when were needed, and he worked tirelessly and often through the night or on very little sleep. And it just kind of highlights to us, it's good to have our routine, but the important thing that really is highlighted here is that inner reform, that inner determination to make change, to dive deeper in our meditations, that today's meditation will be deeper than the last. And sometimes we need to kind of shake ourselves up with, the routine that we get into. One of the blessings, I don't think many of us necessarily see it as a blessing, but maybe just try this on as a possibility. But one of the blessings of the pandemic is actually might seem, first of all, like a curse, even certainly not anything positive, but just that we can't go to the temples and do our meditations in the set time that we would typically do them. Now, of course, we all want to get back to that. I don't think there's anyone that doesn't look forward to that. Anyone that lives, in a community, at least anyway. Some of you live outside of communities and don't have that, ability. So it's just probably in a way a more dynamic time for you because there's so much more online activity. But this is an opportunity for those that were able to go to meditations in a temple, in a chapel, with Ananda or with your meditation group or center. This is a time that we've had to kind of shake up that routine and dive deeply ourselves and find for ourselves the determination, the dedication, and the yearning. Really, what Master, what Swami is saying here, what Master is really saying through how he has been in his life, is it's that deep, total concentrated yearning, craving to love the divine. And we often have to really work hard to develop that within ourselves. And so that's really what comes to the fore for me with this. Um, Master was encouraging group meditation, but it was really developing that individual deepening meditation. And the other thing that kind of struck out here, two things really. One was, how Master would, even though if you could get into this kind of routine, Master would lift everyone up out of the ruts and grooves of routine. And just, even though Master isn't physically with us, isn't it true now that when we get caught into a routine, we get caught in a habit or a way of being, Master, like life's circumstances, which we could say is an outward thing, but really as a disciple of Yogananda, we know that everything that comes through us, everything, even those great challenging moments, come from the Guru, come from Master. So he's constantly shaking things up with us. I've often heard this saying, and I felt it true myself, that at Ananda, everything can change on a dime. It just, so quickly, things can change and move, because that is the flow of the divine. It's treating each individual moment that it's part of this flow. And in that flow, just like a stream, it can be going nicely down in one direction at a certain speed, but in a moment it spins to the right, and the sides collapse and debris comes in, and all of these things alter the flow of the river. And so we ourselves have to be ready to change in an instant. And so we just trusting that Master, even though he isn't here with us in the physical form, he is constantly lifting us out of the grooves. And just as I said, this pandemic, it is obviously a global karma, but at the same time, it's also a gift wrap opportunity for us to get out of the grooves of the habits of communal in-person meditations and many of the other things that we do together, as hard and challenging as that can be. And then this is the other point that really rises to me, is just two things. And these were things that, I drew a lot from this chapter. I've said this already, moving to Ananda Village. I really took a lot from this chapter. Just, Master would, soon I was rising at 4 o'clock every morning, staggering out of bed, admittedly, with the indispensable aid of an alarm clock. And I remember being in Karma Yoga, and I can't remember the name of the house that it is there, the group kind of house, but I remember I didn't do this straight away, but as I kind of developed, and there's a period in Karma Yoga where this is at the Expanding Light retreat in Northern California, within Ananda Village near Nevada City. And, part of when you first go into Karma Yoga, you are expected to kind of join the sadhanas at the retreat, which is energization exercises. Probably the largest portion is yoga postures, and then a shorter meditation. Well, as I was a Kriya Ban, I'd been initiated in Kriya. As I was moving to the village, I quickly also was able to go to a Hansa temple, and Hansa at that time, which, now the Temple of Light is used in its place as a newer temple, obviously not during these lockdowns, but Hunza Temple was where the village would, in the morning, the village, the meditation retreat, the expanding light, sorry, is part of the village. And so the retreat guests would go to the expanding light, and the rest of the village had the opportunity, if they wanted to go to Hunza Temple. And so I went to Hunza Temple, and it was really as I started to do this that I started to rise at 4 o'clock, or as close to it as I could. I'd start with energization. I would often do a short yoga routine. I wouldn't do, um, an hour as much, but I would do certainly something like half an hour of yoga, and then I'd walk down to Hunza Temple. And so I was just kind of very deeply and inspired to emulate what Swami Kriyananda's enthusiasm for diving into meditation. And meditation didn't come easy to me. I had to work very hard at it to overcome restlessness. And I'd have a bench, I'd have a seat, I'd have a cushion, I'd have to kind of interchange between the three as I did these longer meditations. But, I just, put my heart and soul in it. And so he's saying, soon at 4 o'clock, he was waking up. And then again, a paragraph later, soon I was looking forward to my meditation times as eagerly as the worldly man looks forward to an evening partying. I mean, really take that in. Just, what is he really saying here? Swami is constantly showing us the right attitudes and the teachings that he has learned from Master, and also that he's learned from his own experience. He's bringing in enthusiasm, he's bringing in spiritual discipline, he's coming up with a routine. And then we've all heard this, I think, if we've been on this particular path. If you are new to it and just watching this YouTube channel as a recording, maybe you will not have heard this, but for most of us, we all would have heard this, that the more we meditate, the more we want to meditate. The less we meditate, the less we want to meditate. And it's so true. I have found this to be true in, in both of these areas. This is not something that I've read and thought, well, Swami must, or Master must be, that must be correct, and so I'll believe them. This has been true in my life. When the times I've meditated less, then it's I've wanted to meditate less. You get into that routine. When I've meditated more, you want to meditate more. And this is what we have. This is what Swami is kind of tuning into. He's getting himself into that discipline of longer meditations, so that longer daily meditations, so that he can actually want to meditate for longer. And that's really where the rich depth comes. Now, some of us have very responsible lives where we have family members and we have maybe long work days or other commitments to other family members or friends, etc., where we're really responsible for other people and other duties in our daily life. And so it may not be possible, but Swami again touches on this, where he really talks about his Saturdays, that he would take Saturday, a day when they didn't have their chores, when he could really relish and dive into this individual longer meditation. And so he'd meditate several hours, many hours on a Saturday morning. Sometimes he would fast, and he would take this time also to meditate several hours in the evening on a Saturday after that longer meditation in the morning. And so again, our schedules may not allow for this, but we can certainly look at our lives. When can I increase a longer meditation? When can I increase a day or a morning or a few hours that are dedicated to diving into God? And even if we aren't able to meditate for a long amount of time currently, maybe, maybe we're getting older and the body, we're adjusting to how do I meditate for longer as my body changes with old age. I always remember a beautiful satsang when I was leading the Kriya Sangha at Ananda Village, and for our Kriya Bhajan retreat, Nai Swami Jaya gave this wonderful topic talk, and he really spoke to the power of and what happens as we develop in our Kriya practices. You're getting older, and he's in his 70s, and I think many people at the village and other people outside of the village are older, and it was a very dynamic and appropriate and inspiring talk. And so that's why I kind of bring it up. I always think, as we get older, I mean, I'm not in my 70s, but I certainly notice a difference between now being in my kind of heading into my later 40s. Uh, but, that's very different from when I first came to Ananda in, you know, 11, 12 years ago when I was my mid 30s. There's just a difference. And so each decade, each passing years, we change. And so maybe we need to kind of deal with our meditation and our time alone in a different way. Maybe we can't sit as long as we could. And one of the things that Nayaswami Jaya was really saying was, if we develop those habits of sitting deeply in meditation early on, then as we get older, it becomes easier, was one of the things that he was saying in that topic. And so as we should look, and so maybe we need to take a few hours where it's not all meditation, but it's a time to kind of be with yourself. Maybe it's reading the new path and meditating upon it. Maybe it's journaling. Maybe it's doing affirmations. Maybe it's introspection. This is, as we study this book, it's an opportunity to introspect and to kind of create goals and where we want to go in our lives. So whether we can dedicate a whole Saturday, whether we can dedicate just a few hours, maybe it's just an hour, maybe it's some time when we get home, but if we can create that time together where we literally spiritually rejuvenate in that alone time. The science now really supports this. The science really is saying our lives in this kind of media, online, overwhelming, all these outer distractions and pulls on us. But now it's so important that we take the time in our lives to disconnect from everything. We, in a sense, go on retreat and kind of rejuvenate ourselves. We need to have a space from the demands of everything. And in that space, we recharge ourselves. We become more creative. We get more energy. We have greater sense of purpose. We have greater clarity. So many things that we gain by taking some time each week to really disconnect and have on our own. So as we get older, maybe we need to look at ways in which we can do that isn't always just longer meditations, particularly now that we are in a pandemic. Meditations for some people are indeed much harder. So take this week to look at how can I deepen my meditation each day. Maybe you can get up earlier. Maybe you can also take time in the week to have this time to disconnect. And, Swami really just approached these things very head on and just did them. He has that ability to kind of this is where I want to go. And that's why he went so quickly, because he could dive very deeply in it. Let's just take that in for a moment. Again, another attitude that Swami shares with us, easily missed. Practice, as he's talking about the energization exercises, practicing these exercises gratefully every morning and evening. I found them marvelously effective for banishing fatigue and developing a radiant, lasting sense of well-being. Practicing these exercises gratefully. How often do we practice the energization exercises gratefully? Hopefully it's every day, but it is a very instructive point here. You know, when Swami says these things, it's a wonderful thing to adopt this week. Just deepening your gratitude when you practiced energization exercises. If you don't know the energization exercises, connect with anandasacramento.org and learn the path to Kriya Yoga, taking the lessons in meditation 1, or joining online with Ananda if you're not near Ananda Sacramento, you know, to learn those exercises. But if we have a practice of energization exercises, gratefully practicing, what does gratitude do? It opens up the heart. And so we are drawing consciously this energy within us. The greater the will, the greater the flow of energy, drawing it into the medulla. But what also helps us to draw that energy is the heart. And gratitude opens us up. It kind of brings us enthusiasm, joy, it relaxes our body, our energy, it helps us to be free and open. And what does that do? That strengthens and empowers our energy. So this week, practicing gratitude as we practice the energization exercises. Again, he touches on, I'll just touch on this briefly. His teachings, Yogananda's, stress the underlying oneness of all faiths. Such an important part of Master's teachings. He's really reaching everyone just by focusing on the Bhagavad Gita and the Christian Bible, the true teachings of Christianity, the true and essential teachings of yoga. But his whole, the message is to reach all religions, all paths, all people, atheist and everyone, that there is a universality in all these different religions. And of course, he comes to talking about Jesus on our path of self-realization, not just the gurus that are mentioned in Autobiography of a Yogi, in our line of gurus, Babaji, Lahiri, Swami Sri Yukteswar, of course, Master himself, but Jesus. And what comes to mind here is about the second coming of Christ. Master often speaks of this work as the second coming of Christ. This work is part of the second coming of Christ. And how? For it teaches people how to fulfill the true promise of Jesus, not to return again outwardly, but in the souls of those who loved him and communed with him. So that's you and me. When we practice our meditation, we get to commune and to be with Jesus. We get to live these teachings. We get to experience this vibration. We get to share that. And when we do share that vibration, we are part of the second coming of Christ. And so here we come to the end of this week. So you've got your practices, kind of recapitulate, take into your journaling. How can I, into your introspection, how can I deepen my meditation practice? Maybe I can get up earlier. Maybe it's lengthening an evening meditation. Maybe it's strengthening one of the particular techniques. Maybe it's my prayer, whatever it may be. Also, it is an opportunity to look at, when can I do a longer meditation? What how do I take this time out for myself spiritually, whether it's doing longer meditation or having time to introspect? What can I do each week to honor that, allowing for my schedule, but also being very honest with myself? Where can I really spend that time to lengthen and, most of all, deepen? Let's say deepen and then lengthen as we change our lives. Many blessings to you. Next week we'll continue. So we're continuing on. We start on page 198. It's the very last chapter, a very last paragraph, which starts, "Tell me." I said, hesitating before taking this philosophical plunge. So it's just at the very last page of 198. And you'll figure out now that we were kind of really doing 4 pages, give or take, every session. Have a wonderful week. Take this, read it again, dive deeply. Let's change our lives through diving into this great scripture.